The medical pod hummed softly in the dim light. Sarah Chun stood perfectly still, staring at the man inside. Her brother David lay there with his eyes half open, tubes running into his arms. The doctors said he would live. They said his body would heal. But they also said other things that made Sarah's chest feel tight and heavy. The Crossroads Station had been their home for 3 years. It was a massive structure floating in space where ships from 100 different worlds came to trade. Humans were still new here, still learning how to do business with aliens who had been traveling the stars for thousands of years. Most aliens thought humans were weak, too emotional, too soft. David had been so excited about his work. He was only 24 years old, but he was brilliant with machines. He could look at an engine and understand it in ways that made older engineers jealous. He had been working on something special, something that would make faster-than-light travel cheaper and safer. He talked about it all the time, his eyes bright with enthusiasm. 3 days ago, David had been walking through the lower decks of the station. He needed a specific part for his project, and the cheaper shops were down there. He saw something he should not have seen. 4 Krell were loading containers marked with someone else's company logos. The technology inside those containers was worth millions. David was smart enough to know what he was seeing. He was not smart enough to know he should have walked away. The Krell noticed him. They offered him money to forget what he saw. A lot of money? David said no. He said he would report them to station security. The Krell laughed at that. One of them, a massive creature with dark blue scales and 3 eyes, grabbed David by the throat. His name was Thaxron, and he was important in something called the Krell Syndicate. They did not kill David. That would have caused too many problems. Instead, they hurt him in ways that would not show up on simple medical scans. They used a device that sent waves into his brain, scrambling the connections between his thoughts. When they were done, they left him in an alley. A cleaning drone found him 6 hours later. Sarah arrived at the medical center as fast as she could. The doctors, a mix of humans and aliens, explained everything in calm, professional voices. The damage was permanent. David's brain could not fully repair itself. He would be able to walk, eat, and do basic tasks. But the part of his mind that made him special, that let him understand machines and solve complex problems, that part was broken. He would never be an engineer again. Can he talk? Sarah asked, her voice steady. Simple words, yes. Complex thoughts will be difficult for him? Sarah nodded slowly. She walked to David's pod and placed her hand on the glass. Inside, David's eyes focused on her face. His mouth moved. Sarah, he whispered through the speakers. His voice was slow and thick, like he had forgotten how words worked. I'm here, she said. I'm right here. Sorry. Stop. You have nothing to be sorry for. David's eyes filled with tears. TR-tried ... tell ... security. Sarah had already tried that too. Station security told her they would investigate. But everyone knew the Krell Syndicate paid the security officers well. The investigation would find nothing. Thaxron and his crew had diplomatic immunity anyway. They were protected by laws that humans had no power to change. Over the next week, Sarah learned everything she could. She talked to people in the lower decks who saw things but were too afraid to speak officially. She found others who had been hurt by the Krell Syndicate. She learned that Thaxron was known for this. When someone got in his way, he broke them just enough to send a message, but not enough to start a war. The human authorities on the station expressed sympathy. They said they were working on making things safer. They said they were in talks with Galactic Council representatives. Everyone said words that meant nothing. Everyone expected Sarah to cry, scream, and eventually give up. That was what humans did, according to most aliens. Humans felt too much and thought too little. Sarah visited David every day. She watched him struggle to remember her name. She watched him try to hold a spoon and forget what to do with it. The brilliant light in his eyes was gone, replaced by confusion and frustration. Sometimes he would cry without knowing why. On the 10th day, something changed in Sarah. She was sitting beside David's bed, watching him sleep, when the anger finally settled into something cold and hard in her chest. Anger was useless. Anger made people stupid. The Krell expected anger from humans. They expected her to do something rash that would get her killed or arrested. She would not give them what they expected. Sarah stood up and walked to the window. Outside, the stars stretched forever in all directions. Somewhere out there, Thaxron was probably laughing about the stupid human who tried to be brave. He had already forgotten David's name. If he ever bothered to learn it at all, that was his mistake. Sarah turned back to her brother. "I'm going away for a while," she told him, even though he was sleeping. "I need to learn some things. I need to become someone different. But I'll come back. And when I do, they'll remember what they did to you." She left the medical center and went straight to her small apartment. She sold everything she did not need. She sent messages to her freight company, resigning from her pilot position. She had been a good pilot, but that would not help with what came next. Sarah spent 3 days researching. She learned about military training programs. She learned about intelligence agencies. She learned about the Krell culture, their language, and their business practices. She made lists and plans. She calculated how long everything would take, 5 years minimum. Maybe more, 5 years of her life given to preparation. 5 years of becoming someone who could stand against the Krell Syndicate without being crushed. 5 years of waiting for the right moment. Most people would say it was too long. Most people would say revenge was not worth 5 years of your life. But those people did not understand. This was not just about revenge. This was about making sure the Krell understood that humans were not easy targets. This was about protecting the next person, who might see something they should not see. This was about love. Sarah took one last look around her apartment. In the morning, she would board a transport to Earth. She would join the Terran Defense Force. She would begin the long road to becoming someone the Krell would fear. She thought about David's smile before all this happened. She thought about his excitement when he solved a difficult problem. She thought about the future he should have had. "I'm going to make this right," she whispered to the empty room. "I promise." The next morning, Sarah Chun disappeared from Crossroads Station. Most people forgot about her within a month. The Krell Syndicate never thought about her at all. That was exactly what she wanted. 5 years changed everything. The training center on Mars was cold and harsh. Sarah stood in line with 40 other recruits, all of them trying to prove they deserved to be in the Terran Defense Force Special Operations Division. Most of them were younger than her. Most of them were stronger. But Sarah had something they did not have. She had a reason that went deeper than duty or glory. The instructors tried to break her in the first month. They woke her at random hours. They made her run until her legs stopped working. They put her in situations where there was no right answer, only different kinds of failure. Some recruits cried. Some quit. Sarah just kept going. "Why are you here, Chun?" Her commander asked one day after a particularly brutal training exercise. "To serve, sir," Sarah answered. "Everyone says that." "What's the real reason?" Sarah looked him in the eye. "Someone hurt someone I love? I need to make sure I can stop that from happening to others." The commander studied her face for a long moment. "Good answer. But remember, revenge makes soldiers sloppy." "It's not revenge, sir. It's preparation." She graduated in the top 10% of her class. She learned how to fight with weapons and without them. She learned how to survive in hostile environments. She learned how to think clearly when exhausted and in pain. Most importantly, she learned patience. After 2 years in special operations, Sarah transferred to naval intelligence. This surprised some people. She was good at combat. Why move to a desk job? But Sarah knew what she needed. Fighting skills were useful, but information was power. She needed to understand how the enemy thought, how they operated, and how to find their weaknesses. Intelligence work was different from combat. It was slower, quieter. Sarah spent months learning how to analyze data patterns. She learned 6 alien languages, including Krell. She studied trade routes, criminal organizations, and galactic law. She became an expert on the outer fringe. The lawless regions of space where governments had little control. She also learned about the Krell Syndicate. She read every report, every incident, every known member. The organization had grown larger in the years since David's attack. They controlled shipments, protection rackets, and illegal technology trades across dozens of systems. They were protected by layers of shell companies and corrupt officials, and at the center of operations in the outer fringe was Warlord TAKX single quotes Ron. Sarah learned everything about him. He was 73 years old, which was young for a Krell. He had risen through the syndicate by being smart and brutal in equal measure. He had 17 known associates, 3 ships under his direct command, and operations on 12 different stations and planets. He believed humans were beneath notice, useful only as labor or entertainment. At night, Sarah would review the information about the attack on David. She had copies of everything. She knew which security officers had been paid to look away. She knew which doctors had been threatened into silence. She knew the names of every Krell who had been in that alley, but she never let anger control her. Anger was a fire that burned hot and fast. Sarah needed something that would burn slow and steady for as long as it took. In her 4th year, Sarah started building connections. She met traders, smugglers, information brokers, and mercenaries. She helped some of them with small problems, asking for nothing in return. She learned who could be trusted and who would sell information to the highest bidder. She became known as someone competent and discreet. She also started gathering resources. She saved every credit she earned. She made careful investments in shipping companies and mining operations. She bought a small ship at auction, a decommissioned patrol corvette that most people thought was ready for scrap. She spent 6 months rebuilding it in her spare time, installing better engines, enhanced sensors, and communication systems that could crack most commercial encryptions. "You're wasting your skills here," her supervisor told her during her 4th year. "You could move up. Command track. Maybe even diplomatic corps." "I appreciate that, sir, but I have other plans." "What kind of plans?" "Private sector. Security consulting." Her supervisor frowned. "The outer fringe? That's where the work is. That's also where people disappear." Sarah smiled slightly. "Then I'll have to be careful." She submitted her resignation with a perfect service record. Naval intelligence gave her an excellent recommendation. No one suspected that every skill she learned, every contact she made, every piece of information she gathered was all focused on a single goal. Before she left Earth, Sarah visited David one last time. He was in a care facility in North America, a place with gardens and kind staff. The doctors said he had improved as much as he could. He could speak now, simple sentences, and he could take care of his basic needs. But he would never live independently. He would never work again. Sarah sat with him in the garden. David was 30 now, but he looked older. There was a softness to his face like a child who never quite grew up. "Sarah," he said, smiling when he saw her. "You came." "Of course I came." "I'm going away for work." "Work," David repeated. He had learned to echo words to help himself understand. "Far away?" "Pretty far. But I'll send messages." David's smile faded. "The bad men. The ones who I know," Sarah said gently. "You're going to hurt them." It was not a question. Even with his damaged mind, David understood her. Sarah took his hand. "I'm going to make sure they can't hurt anyone else. Be careful." "I will." "Don't become bad like them." Those words stayed with Sarah as she traveled to the outer fringe. "Don't become bad like them." David was right to worry. Revenge could poison a person. It could turn you into the thing you hated. Sarah had to remember that this was not about becoming a monster. It was about justice. It was about protection. The outer fringe was exactly as dangerous as the reports said. Dozens of species lived and worked in the scattered stations and colonies, most of them trying to escape laws or attention. Pirates, smugglers, and criminals ran businesses openly. Violence was common. Law enforcement was a joke, It was perfect. Sarah set herself up as a security consultant. She took small jobs at first. A merchant needed protection during a delivery. A station needed someone to track down thieves. She did the work efficiently and asked fair prices. Word spread that there was a competent human in the area. After 6 months, she started getting bigger offers. Some of them came from organizations she knew were criminal fronts. She turned down the obviously illegal work, but she accepted jobs in the gray areas. She protected shipments without asking what was in the containers. She provided security for meetings without caring what was discussed. She built a reputation, professional, skilled, and most importantly, not interested in anyone's business beyond her contract. It took 8 months before she got her first job connected to the Krell Syndicate. It was a minor task, guarding a warehouse for a shipping company that was actually a front. Sarah did the job perfectly. Nothing was stolen. No one caused trouble. 2 weeks later, she got another call. This time from someone higher in the organization. Sarah sat in her small apartment looking at the message. This was the beginning. The door was opening. In a year, maybe 2, she would be close enough to the syndicate to start the real work. 5 years of preparation. 5 years of becoming someone else. 5 years of waiting. She thought about David in his garden, warning her not to become bad. She thought about Thaxron, who had probably forgotten David's name. The day after he broke him. Sarah opened the message and accepted the job. The waiting was almost over. Soon, it would be time to show the Krell Syndicate what happened when you underestimated humans. Soon, they would learn that patience was not weakness. Soon, they would learn that some people never forget. The attack happened exactly as Sarah planned it. She was escorting a Krell Syndicate shipment through the lower corridors of Rusthaven Station when 6 armed Viridian pirates came around the corner. They had plasma rifles and looked confident. The Krell guards reached for their weapons. Too slow. Sarah moved faster. She dropped 2 pirates with precise shots before they could fire. She used a cargo container as cover, taking out a third. The Krell guards recovered and handled the rest. The whole fight lasted 90 seconds. What the Krell guards did not know was that Sarah had paid those pirates to attack. She had given them defective weapons that would fail after the first few shots. She had told them exactly where to run when things went wrong. 3 of them were in a bar right now, spending the money she gave them. The other 3 were nursing minor injuries and wondering how a human woman had moved so fast. "Good work, human," the lead Krell guard growled. His name was Vex, and he had worked for the Syndicate for 20 years. "Just doing my job," Sarah said. Checking her weapon, word of the incident reached higher levels of the Syndicate within hours. A human security contractor had saved a valuable shipment. A human who stayed calm under fire and did not ask uncomfortable questions. The Syndicate liked employees who did their job and kept their mouths shut. More jobs came after that. Sarah worked 3 or 4 contracts every week. She guarded shipments, protected facilities, and sometimes tracked down people who stole from the Syndicate. She never killed anyone who did not try to kill her first. She never hurt anyone who did not deserve it. She kept her hands as clean as possible while working for criminals, but she was learning everything she needed to know. Every job taught her something new. She mapped the Syndicate's warehouses and safe houses. She memorized their shipping schedules and trade routes. She planted tiny listening devices in offices and meeting rooms. She copied data from computers when no one was watching. Piece by piece, she built a complete picture of how the organization worked. She also started making friends. Kex was a young Krell, barely 30 years old. He worked in logistics, tracking shipments and managing inventory. He was good at his job but unhappy with his pay. The Syndicate took most of the profit while workers like him got barely enough to survive. Sarah met him in a bar one night. She bought him a drink and listened to him complain. "The bosses get rich while we do all the work," Kex said, his words slurred from alcohol. "It's not fair." "Nothing's fair out here," Sarah said. "But at least we're alive, I guess." Kex looked at her curiously. "Why does a human work for the Syndicate? I thought your people didn't like us." "I go where the work is. The Syndicate pays on time." "You don't care that we're criminals?" Sarah shrugged. Everyone's a criminal out here. The only difference is some people have official approval. Kex laughed at that. They talked for another hour. Sarah learned about his family back on the Krell homeworld. She learned about his dreams of saving enough money to start his own business. She learned that he kept detailed records of every shipment, including ones the syndicate did not report to authorities. She also learned that he hated Thaxron. Most low-level workers did. Thaxron took more than his share and blamed others when things went wrong. He had killed 3 employees in the last year for minor mistakes. Sarah filed all this information away. She bought Kex another drink and let him talk. Over the next 6 months, she met others like Kex, workers who were unhappy but trapped. People who wanted out but had nowhere to go. Sarah listened to all of them. She never pushed. She never asked suspicious questions. She just listened and remembered. Then came the day she had been waiting for. Thaxron wants to meet you, Vex told her after a job. He's impressed with your work. Sarah's heart beat faster, but her face stayed calm. When? Tomorrow. His office on Deck 7. That night, Sarah sat in her apartment reviewing everything she knew about Thaxron. This was the moment she had worked toward for years. She would finally face the creature who had destroyed her brother's life. She could not show recognition. She could not show hatred. She had to be just another employee. Meeting her boss, she practiced her expressions in the mirror, calm, professional, maybe slightly nervous, since that would be natural for a human meeting a syndicate warlord. But nothing that would make him suspicious. The next day, Sarah walked to Thaxron's office with steady steps. The room was large, decorated with expensive items from a dozen different worlds. Thaxron sat behind a massive desk made from some kind of dark metal. He was bigger than Sarah remembered, his blue scales darker, his 3 eyes sharp and intelligent. 2 guards stood by the door. Sarah recognized one of them from the security footage of David's attack. She forced her face to show nothing. "The human everyone talks about," Thaxron said in Krell. His voice was deep and rough, like rocks grinding together. "I'm just someone who does her job?" "Sir," Sarah replied in perfect Krell. Thaxron's center eye widened slightly. "You speak our language. That's unusual for your kind. I find it useful to understand the people I work for." "Smart." Thaxron leaned back in his chair. "You've done good work for us. You don't ask questions. You don't cause problems? Why is that?" "Most humans can't help being emotional about things." Sarah allowed herself a small smile. "Emotions don't pay my bills. I learned early that survival matters more than feelings." Wise words. "Where did you learn this wisdom?" "Bad experiences. I lost people I cared about. I learned that being emotional just gets you hurt." This was not entirely a lie. Sarah had lost someone, the old version of herself, the person who believed the system would protect her family. Thaxron studied her for a long moment. "I have a special job. It requires someone smart and discreet. Someone who won't panic when things get complicated." "What kind of job?" "There's a human merchant who thinks he's smart. He's been stealing from shipments and selling the goods himself. I need someone to explain the situation to him. Someone he might trust because they're human." Sarah understood immediately. Thaxron wanted her to betray another human. This was a test. If she did this, she would prove her loyalty to the syndicate over her own species. "What kind of explanation are we talking about?" Sarah asked. "The kind that makes him stop stealing and start cooperating. I don't care how you do it, as long as it works." Sarah pretended to think about it. "I'll need details. Who he is, what he stole, where to find him. Vex will give you everything." Thaxron smiled, showing rows of sharp teeth. "I'm curious to see how you handle this. Humans are usually too soft for this kind of work." "I'm not most humans," Sarah said. "No," Thaxron agreed. "No, you're not." Sarah left the office with her mission details. That night she found the human merchant, a middle-aged man named Tom Harris, who had indeed been skimming from shipments. But Sarah also learned that Tom had been forced into it. The syndicate had kidnapped his daughter and told him to steal for them or she would die. Sarah made a choice. She helped Tom fake his own death, smuggled his daughter off the station, and arranged for them both to reach a safe colony. Then she stole enough goods from a different syndicate warehouse to make it look like Tom had one final big theft before disappearing. She reported to Thaxron that the merchant had fled and taken a fortune with him. She gave Thaxron the location of the raided warehouse. She made it look like her failure. "You let him escape," Thaxron said, his voice dangerous. "I underestimated him. It won't happen again." Sarah waited to see if this was the end. If Thaxron would kill her for failing, instead he laughed. "At least you're honest about it. Most employees would lie. That counts for something." He leaned forward. "But understand this, human. One mistake is acceptable. Two would be fatal. I understand completely, sir." Over the next month, Sarah worked her way deeper into the syndicate. She proved her value. She fed them information about human trade patterns that seemed useful but actually helped human merchants avoid syndicate operations. She planted evidence that led to the arrest of their competitors. She made herself indispensable. And every day she gathered more information, more evidence, more ammunition for what was coming. One night, Kex came to her apartment, drunk and crying. He told her that Thaxron had killed his cousin over a mistake in his shipping manifest. "I hate him," Kex said. "I hate all of them. But what can we do? They're too powerful." Sarah handed him water and let him calm down. "Maybe someday someone will stop them." "Who?" "The council doesn't care about the outer fringe. The law doesn't reach here." "Not all justice comes from the law," Sarah said quietly. Kex looked at her with red eyes. "What do you mean?" "Nothing. I'm just saying, powerful people eventually make mistakes. When they do, they fall hard." Kex fell asleep on her couch that night. Sarah sat by the window, looking at the stars. Everything was in place. She had the information. She had the evidence. She had people inside the syndicate who were ready to turn against their leaders. Soon, very soon now. It had been 6 years since David's attack. 6 years of preparation, patience, and planning. The waiting was almost over. The message came at midnight. Thaxron wanted to see her immediately. Sarah knew what this meant before she even read the full text. Someone had talked. Someone had noticed that she was too perfect, too useful, too convenient. She arrived at Thaxron's office to find 8 guards instead of the usual 2. They searched her for weapons, taking her pistol and knife. They found the small communication device in her jacket, but missed the emergency beacon sewn into her boot heel. Good enough. Thaxron sat behind his desk with 4 of his top lieutenants around him. One of them was the guard who had been there the night David was hurt. Sarah had memorized all their faces years ago. "Do you know why you're here?" Thaxron asked. "You tell me," Sarah said calmly. "We did some research on you. Took us a while, but we found some interesting information. There was a human on Crossroads Station 6 years ago. An engineer named David Chun. Someone hurt him very badly." Thaxron smiled. "He had a sister named Sarah Chun, a cargo pilot who disappeared right after the incident." Sarah said nothing. Her face showed no emotion. "Now we have a security contractor named Sarah Chun who speaks perfect Krell and knows military tactics." "Very coincidental." Thaxron leaned forward. "Did you really think you could fool us?" "I wasn't trying to fool anyone. I've done good work for you. You've been spying on us, gathering information. We found some of your little devices." He held up 2 of the listening bugs she had planted. "We're still looking for the others. So what happens now?" Sarah asked. "Now you die, slowly, painfully. We'll make it last for days. Maybe we'll even record it and send it to your broken brother." Thaxron stood up. "Did you really think one human could hurt the syndicate? Did you waste 6 years of your life for impossible revenge?" Sarah smiled then. It was not a nice smile. "I didn't waste 6 years. I invested them." She clicked her tongue twice, a signal she had practiced thousands of times. Everything happened at once. The office lights went out. Emergency backups failed to activate. In the darkness, Sarah dropped to the floor. Plasma bolts flew over her head as the guards fired blindly. She had known they would panic. The door exploded inward. 3 figures in combat armor came through, firing stun rounds. Sarah recognized the armor markings: Terran Defense Force Special Operations. The squad she had contacted 3 months ago when she confirmed the syndicate was trafficking human colonists, but that was just the beginning. Outside the office, alarms started screaming across Rust Haven Station. Every syndicate facility was being raided simultaneously. Sarah had sent detailed maps, schedules, and evidence to law enforcement agencies across 12 systems. She had spent months coordinating the timing, making sure everyone acted at exactly the same moment. The station's communication system broadcast a message on all channels. Sarah's voice, calm and clear. This is Sarah Chun. For 6 years I have documented every crime committed by the Krell Syndicate. Everything is now in the hands of the Galactic Council, Terran Defense Force, and local law enforcement. All syndicate accounts have been frozen. All evidence has been distributed. It's over. In the darkness of the office, Sarah heard Thaxron roar with rage. Someone turned on a handheld light. The TDF soldiers had secured the room. The lieutenants were on the floor, stunned. Thaxron was in restraints, his 3 eyes burning with hatred. "You can't do this," he snarled. "We have diplomatic protection. We have lawyers. We have—" "Nothing," Sarah interrupted. "You have nothing. Your money is gone. Your protection is gone. Your power is gone." She had spent 2 years carefully moving syndicate funds. Small amounts at first, routed through dozens of accounts, converted to different currencies, moved again and again until the trail was impossible to follow. The money had been donated to organizations that help victims of trafficking and crime. Every credit they had stolen was now being used against them. "Where's our money?" Thaxron demanded. "Helping people you hurt. Your accounts are empty. Your front companies are bankrupt. Your paid officials are being arrested along with you." One of the TDF soldiers turned to Sarah. "Ma'am, we need you to come with us for debriefing, in a moment." Sarah walked closer to Thaxron. The guards tensed, but she just stood there looking at him. "Do you remember David Chun?" Thaxron stared at her. "Who?" "The engineer on Crossroads Station. 6 years ago, you and your men broke his mind because he saw you stealing." Recognition flashed in Thaxron's eyes, then dismissal. That's what this is about? Some random human from years ago?" "That human was my brother. You destroyed his life because he wouldn't ignore your crimes. You thought humans were too weak, too emotional to be a threat." Thaxron started to laugh. "You proved my point. You threw away 6 years of your life because of emotion. You're weak. All humans are weak." Sarah shook her head. "You still don't understand. I didn't do this because of emotion. I did this because I could. Because someone had to. Because you needed to learn that humans don't forgive and we don't forget." She turned to leave, then stopped. "You thought we were weak because we care about each other. That was your mistake. We care enough to be patient. We care enough to plan. We care enough to make sure you never hurt anyone again. This won't stop the syndicate." Thaxron shouted as the soldiers dragged him toward the door. "We're bigger than one station. We have operations everywhere." "Had," Sarah corrected. Past tense. Right now, every major syndicate operation is being shut down. Every account is frozen. Every member with outstanding warrants is being arrested. I've been coordinating with law enforcement across 40 systems for the last year." It was true. The evidence Sarah gathered had been shared with every agency willing to act. She had timed everything perfectly. Simultaneous raids across the outer fringe. Hundreds of arrests. The syndicate's power structure was collapsing like a building with no foundation. In the hallway, Sarah saw Kex and others being led away in restraints. When Kex saw her, his eyes went wide. You set us up." "No," Sarah said. "I gave you all chances to leave. I told you 6 months ago that something big was coming. I told you to get out. You chose to stay. She had. She had warned everyone in the syndicate who she thought deserved a warning. Some had listened and disappeared. Others, like Kex, thought they were too deep in to escape. But I helped you. Kex protested. I gave you information, and that will be considered during your trial. Cooperate with the investigators and you might get a light sentence. Sarah walked past him. You made your choices, Kex. Now you deal with the consequences? Outside the station, the Terran Defense Force had 3 cruisers in position. They were arresting syndicate ships trying to flee. Some fought. Most surrendered once they realized escape was impossible. Sarah stood in the command center, watching it all unfold. An older officer approached her. Admiral Stevens, the man she had contacted when she first confirmed the syndicate's human trafficking operation. It's working exactly as you planned, Stevens said. 47 major arrests so far. We've seized 12 ships and 15 facilities. The intelligence you provided was flawless. Thank you, Admiral. The Council wants to meet with you. There are some questions about how you gathered all this information. I'm sure there are. Sarah had broken dozens of laws during her infiltration. She had worked for criminals, lied to officials, and violated multiple treaties. But she had also brought down one of the largest criminal organizations in the outer fringe. You might face charges, Stevens warned. I know. I'm ready for that. Stevens studied her face. Was it worth it? 6 years of your life for revenge? It wasn't revenge, Sarah said quietly. Revenge would have been killing Faxron in an alley. This was justice. There's a difference. What's the difference? Revenge is about making yourself feel better. Justice is about stopping them from hurting anyone else. Sarah looked at the displays showing arrested syndicate members being loaded onto transport ships. My brother will never get his life back. But maybe the next person who sees something wrong won't be afraid to speak up. Maybe they'll know that someone is actually watching. Someone actually cares? Stevens nodded slowly. For what it's worth, I think you did the right thing. Not the legal thing, but the right thing. That's good enough for me. Over the next hours, Sarah gave her full report to TDF investigators. She handed over copies of everything she had gathered. Names, dates, transactions, communications. 6 years of evidence. Carefully organized and documented. When they asked how she had managed to infiltrate so deeply, she told them the truth. I became someone they thought was useful. I gave them what they expected from a human efficiency without conscience. They never suspected that a human could be patient enough to wait years for the right moment. Late that night, Sarah sat alone in a small office, watching the news broadcasts. Every channel was covering the story. The collapse of the Krell Syndicate. Hundreds of arrests. Years of crimes exposed. Some reporters called her a hero. Some called her a vigilante. Some questioned whether her methods were legal or ethical. Sarah didn't care about any of that. She opened a communication channel to Earth, to the care facility where David lived. David? She said when his face appeared on the screen. It's over. They can't hurt anyone anymore. David smiled, confused but happy. You did it? Yeah, I did it. Good, David said simply. Then his smile faded. You okay? You're not bad now? Sarah felt tears in her eyes for the first time in 6 years. No, 3 months after the collapse of the Krell Syndicate, Sarah stood in a Galactic Council hearing room. The space was enormous, filled with representatives from 40 different species. They had been questioning her for 3 days. You admit you worked for a criminal organization, a Viridian Council member said, his scales shimmering under the lights. You admit to theft, fraud, and violations of multiple treaties. Why should we not prosecute you? Sarah stood at the podium, calm and steady. Because I stopped a criminal empire that your laws couldn't touch. Because I saved lives that your officials ignored. Because I did what needed to be done. You took the law into your own hands, another council member argued. The law wasn't helping. The Krell Syndicate had diplomatic protection. They paid your security forces. They used your own rules against you. Sarah looked around the room. How many complaints did this council receive about the syndicate? How many times did victims ask for help? Silence. They all knew the answer. Hundreds of complaints, maybe thousands, all ignored or buried under bureaucracy. One human did in 6 years what this entire council couldn't do in decades, Sarah continued. I'm not proud that I had to break laws to do it, but I'm not sorry either. The council members whispered among themselves. Finally, the head counselor spoke. She was a Zun, a species known for their strict adherence to law. The council has decided. You will not face prosecution. The methods you used were irregular, but the results speak for themselves. However, you are banned from serving in any official capacity with galactic law enforcement. I understand, Sarah said. We also want to offer you a position as a consultant. Clearly, you have skills we need. Thank you, but no, I have other plans. She left the council chamber and went straight to the transport station. She had a ship waiting and a long journey ahead. Earth was exactly as she remembered it. The care facility where David lived was in the mountains of North America, surrounded by forests and clean air. Sarah walked through the gardens until she found her brother sitting by a small pond, watching birds. David, he turned and his face lit up. Sarah, you came back. She sat beside him. He looked older, but healthier than when she left. The staff had taken good care of him. I promised I would. You were gone long time, I know. I'm sorry. David shook his head. No sorry, you did important thing. He struggled with the words, but the meaning was clear. Made them stop, made them pay. Yes, good. David took her hand. But now what? What do you do now? That was the question Sarah had been asking herself. For 6 years, her entire focus had been on bringing down the syndicate. Now that it was done, she felt empty, lost. What did you do when you finished the thing you had lived for? She stayed on Earth for 2 months. She spent time with David. She visited their parents' graves. She tried to figure out what came next. The answer came from an unexpected source. A message arrived from someone named Marcus Webb. He was human, a merchant who operated in the outer fringe. His son had been kidnapped by pirates 3 months ago. I heard what you did to the Krell Syndicate, the message said. I heard you help people when the law can't or won't. My son is still out there. The authorities say it's too dangerous to go after the pirates. They say it's not worth the resources. But he's my son. Please, I'll pay whatever you ask. Sarah stared at the message for a long time. She could ignore it. She could stay on Earth, try to build a normal life. No one would blame her, but she knew she wouldn't ignore it. She couldn't. She went to David's room that evening. I need to go away again. Not for years this time, just for a few months. David looked worried. More bad people? Pirates who took someone's child. I'm going to get him back. Dangerous. Maybe, but it's the right thing to do. David nodded slowly. You're a good person, Sarah. You help. People, that's good. Sarah kissed his forehead. I learned that from you. You always tried to do the right thing even when it was hard. 2 weeks later, Sarah was in the outer fringe again. Her ship had new modifications, better weapons, and improved sensors. She had hired a small crew people she trusted from her intelligence days. They tracked the pirates to a base on a moon with no official government. The rescue took 4 days of planning and 6 hours of execution. They infiltrated the base, found Marcus Webb's son along with 12 other captives, and got them all out. 2 pirates were killed in the fighting. The rest were left tied up with evidence of their crimes for local authorities to find. When Sarah delivered the boy to his father, Marcus Webb cried, How can I ever repay you? Tell people what happened. Tell them that someone is out here helping when others won't. Word spread quickly in the outer fringe. There was a human woman who helped people in impossible situations. She didn't work for governments or big corporations. She helped individuals, families, people who had nowhere else to turn. The messages started coming. Someone's daughter was trapped in an abusive work contract. Someone's partner was being blackmailed by criminals. Someone's colony was being threatened by raiders. Sarah couldn't help everyone. Some problems were too big or too complicated, but she helped who she could. She took on cases that others ignored. She used the skills she had learned, the contacts she had made, and the resources she had saved. She also started hiring former syndicate workers who wanted to go legitimate, ex-military personnel looking for meaningful work, people like Kex who had served his time and wanted a second chance. "You want to hire me?" Kex asked when she contacted him. "After everything?" "You helped me when it mattered," Sarah said. "You gave me information that saved lives. That counts for something." Within a year, Sarah had a full team. They called themselves Crossroads Security, named after the station where it all started. They took on cases across the outer fringe and beyond. Protection, rescue, recovery, investigation, anything that helped people who couldn't help themselves. They didn't work cheap, but they worked fair. Rich clients paid full price. Poor clients paid what they could. Some paid nothing at all. The work was dangerous. Sarah lost team members over the years. She got injured more times than she could count, but it felt right. It felt like she was finally doing what she was meant to do. 5 years after the syndicate fell, Sarah returned to Earth for David's birthday. He was 37 now, living in a small apartment near the care facility. He could live independently with some help. He worked at a local school, teaching children basic technology. The kids loved him because he was patient and kind. They sat in his apartment, eating cake and talking about simple things. "You look tired," David said. "I am tired. This work is hard." "But good. You do good things." "I try." David smiled. "I'm proud of you. You could have become monster. Could have let hate control you, but you help people instead." Sarah felt tears in her eyes again. "You warned me not to become bad. I remembered." "Good." David ate some cake, then looked at her seriously. "But Sarah, you need rest sometimes. You need life, not just work." "Maybe someday." "No, not someday. Now." David pointed to a picture on his wall. It showed Sarah at age 20, laughing at something with their parents. That Sarah is still there. Don't forget her. Sarah looked at the picture. That woman seemed like someone from a different lifetime, but David was right. She couldn't lose herself completely in the work, no matter how important it was. That night, Sarah made a decision. She would continue helping people, but she would also take time to live, to rest, to remember that she was more than just a weapon or a tool. 6 months later, Sarah sat in her ship's command center reviewing the latest case. A family of scientists was trapped on a failed colony with no government willing to fund a rescue. Her team had a plan to get them out. "Are you sure about this one?" her second-in-command asked. "It's risky, low profit. Might lose money on it." Sarah looked at the family's photo. A mother, father, and 3 children, all smiling. They reminded her of her own family before everything went wrong. "We're doing it," she said. "That's what we do. We help." A message came through on her personal channel. David sending his weekly update. He had started a community garden at his school. The kids were learning to grow vegetables. He was happy. Sarah smiled and sent a message back. "Stay safe, little brother. I'll visit next month." She closed the channel and looked at her crew. "Okay, people, let's go save some scientists." Her ship turned toward the stars and accelerated. Behind her, the outer fringe sprawled across space, full of dangers and opportunities. Somewhere out there, people needed help. People who had nowhere else to turn. And Sarah Chun would be there, not for revenge, not for glory, but because someone had to be. Because the galaxy was a hard place and people needed to know that someone cared enough to fight for them. Years ago, the Krell Syndicate had hurt her brother. They thought they had broken a family. They thought humans were too weak to matter. They were wrong. Sarah had waited. She had trained. She had made them repent what they did. But more than that, she had become someone who protected others from experiencing the same pain. That was her real victory. Not the destruction of the syndicate, but the creation of something better. Something that helped,